So when you see so much smoke around vitamin D in a positive way, bones, immune, inflammation, dementia, it's just another reason for me to continue to take it.
This is Generation Health. Every week we bring you news, cutting-edge research, and time-tested best practices for living a longer and healthier life. With the tools and information that are available, this generation has the potential to be the healthiest in human history. Following the footsteps of our founder, Joe DiMatteo, we are the second generation of a family dedicated to helping you live better and longer. Sitting to my right is Dante DiMatteo, registered pharmacist and certified strength and conditioning specialist. Hello, sir.
Tyler, how are you?
I'm fantastic.
Good.
And opposite me is Joey DiMatteo, registered pharmacist, board certified clinical nutritionist, and a man with a silenced cell phone.
That's right. That I can guarantee.
Sounds like 007.
I am your host, Tyler Andrews, and today we are going to be talking about a couple of listener questions. We're talking about vitamin D. That comes up a lot. And also ultra-processed food, one of my favorites. But first, what I really want to know is, if you had to finish the sentence, if I had $1 billion, how would you finish it?
Pay off all debt, number one. That would be number one.
Good. That's too practical. Stop that. None of that. This is $1 billion. You don't have to worry about your debt. I
usually look at these beforehand.
You didn't look at this one? I'm so proud of you.
This will be the last time I don't look at it, for sure, because now I'm unprepared.
You don't know what you would do with $1 billion. First reaction, go.
I'd probably buy a house somewhere else for sure. Somewhere on the coast, definitely.
Really?
Probably California, believe it or not, but yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, that's the end of your billion.
The scenery there and the weather,
yeah.
Number one. That's probably the first. But after paying off debt, that's the first thing I'd do. Definitely, set money aside for my kids for sure.
Okay.
That can't be touched, and invest it. And then I'd start looking at what I want to do passion wise. No, but seriously, just to find what I want to do with my time.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have to necessarily go work in the pharmacy and stuff anymore.
This is true.
So,
this is true.
Yeah.
You would not be tired.
That would
anymore.
be part of it. I would still stay with it and do part of that, but I would also want to, start thinking about and looking at maybe what my other passions are and what I could do to help people, etc.
A little philanthropy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right. Dante?
Oh, man. It's taken everything in me not to do the Kanye line, but I won't in this case. I'd rather buy 80 gold chain. No, never mind.
I don't know the line, so I'm gonna say cool. All right.
I would say probably just buy a gym even more grand than the small scale one that I'm planning at the moment, and little donations.
Yeah,
little debt payoff, that kind of stuff. Take care of some family, and maybe buy a couple chains potentially. Maybe not 80, but
okay,
those sort of frivolous things, I guess.
Yeah, you can do some of that.
But no, that's man, that is really tough.
Yeah,
I think a good blend of donation, philanthropic sort of things, and passion pursuit sort of things, taking care of your family sort of things. That's the way I see my $1 billion pie chart.
That's fun. That's fun. Yeah, I would. I mean, obviously all the obvious stuff. I would love to set up, I don't know, like grants or prizes or something for struggling artists, because I was there once upon a time and I was very passionate about what I was doing, but the vicissitudes of life
wasn't really paying off, literally.
Make you
it's gonna be hard.
Cave in certain ways. And I think there's value in that. But also I think it would be cool to be able to drop some money on artists that are doing something interesting and pushing things in a good direction. I think that'd be cool. I've got a buddy that's a missionary. I would love to set him up completely. But really the honest answer is I would buy all of the comic books that I've always wanted to own. And I would have a personal sushi chef.
Oh, wow.
Yep. I would have a resident sushi chef and
sounds amazing.
take my kids traveling places. But that's about it. That's it. Well, it's a fun question because it helps clarify values, right? That's one of the reasons that people fight about money. They're not really fighting about the money. They're fighting about the values that are underneath the money and that inform the choices made. So it's fun to go, what is it you value?
So the chains wasn't not a good look for optics here.
No, it's
that's why it's like of all the ones I didn't look at ahead of time and think about beforehand, it was this one, the one that was going to display my values.
No,
perfect.
that's not, no. You said pay off debts. You said
put money aside for my kids.
Yes,
and I definitely philanthropy. I would just have to really think about what moves me. You know what I mean? And that's part of the prep part. But
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely, very cool. Well, email in. If you have a question, you can email us, questions@askjoedimatteo.com. This one's from Joyce. She said, I would like to know why the D3 does not contain vitamin K2. So that's our vitamin D3, I assume she's talking about. Is it true that they work better in tandem to improve insulin resistance and reduce inflammation? Okay, so I know what D3 is. I know babies get a K2 shot, but I don't know exactly what it is. What is vitamin K2?
So vitamin K really mainly has two components.
Okay.
So technically the baby is not getting a K2 shot, it's getting a K1 shot.
Oh.
K1, and we'll simplify things a little bit, K1 is mainly involved in clotting mechanisms.
Okay.
For example, there's a drug that's not used much anymore, but that was very popular, Coumadin or warfarin, and it basically worked by blocking the action of vitamin K. So it's very strongly involved in clotting mechanisms. So K2 is what you would typically be supplementing with. So that's, the main part. So the shots is a little different. K1, you can get in your diet that comes from green leafy vegetables. K2, you're really getting in fermented foods like sauerkraut, meat, and dairy.
Okay.
And K2 is mainly involved in bone health. There's also some interplay in inflammation, but K2, I would say, is definitely, supplements kind of can come in fads and waves, and some of them stick around, like omega-3s and D.
Sure.
And K2, I would say, is one that's like coming up. It's becoming more popular. You see it in combinations with different products, in bone products. So I would say that's something that more research is being done on, both traditionally and alternatively. So I think that this really is a great question from our standpoint. But we do have a combo product, the D Plus Essentials, and that's a relatively newer product that we've done in the last few years because of the research that has come out. So in the most simple form, her question is about insulin resistance and reducing inflammation.
Yep.
That's not maybe where my mind goes first with D3 and K2. With insulin resistance, diet is going to be your primary, and exercise are going to be your primary movers of that, losing some weight.
Yeah.
There are definitely some supplements that you can do, namely chromium, that would help with blood sugar. There's some other things too, other herbal things. The chromium is the main one there. So that's not where my mind goes to first. Where my mind goes when you talk about D3 and K2 is bone health.
Okay.
And not to oversimplify, but what we have seen studies in the last few years is that there can be calcification of arteries, not just buildup of, the concerns about lipids and fats, but also calcification and hardening and limiting the pliability is a big issue in arteries and also in valves.
Okay, so
soft tissue, even cartilage.
Yeah. So you're talking about calcification, meaning it hardens and it doesn't move. It's not flexible. And so there's the issue of clogging the artery with cholesterol or lipids. And there's also the issue of the hardening of the artery.
Yes.
And where K2 and D help with that? Yes.
So here's, and again, in the simplest form, vitamin D helps you to absorb the calcium you're taking in from food.
Okay.
So, and supplements. So you're ingesting vitamin D, and you are you're ingesting calcium, and with the help of vitamin D, your level's adequate, you're supplementing with it, or you don't need to, whatever. You're absorbing a lot of that calcium and putting it into your blood.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's typically a good thing. It is the main mineral involved in bone building, although there are other ones. But so now you've got this high level of calcium. What K2 has been shown to do is direct that calcium in a large extent to bones.
Okay.
So again, that's the most simple form, is the D is going to help, and that's why they come in tandem, and that's why there's, how can all your Ds not have K in it? And again, if you're not overdoing calcium, I don't think that every person taking D for whatever reason, maybe you take it just when you're sick, maybe your level's low, maybe you have osteopenia, whatever it is.
Right.
If you're not ingesting high levels of calcium, which our supplements do have significant amounts, but not the mega amounts that sometimes traditionally is recommended, that you don't necessarily have to have that K2.
Okay.
So you do need it if you are maybe more in the osteopenic osteoporosis and you are doing some significant calcium, that's more where you need it. But the average person, hey, I'm taking it for my immune system. My level's a little low. I'm in my 30s, I'm in my 40s, no bone issues. I don't think you need to take the K2. But there definitely is some interplay with inflammation. It's involved in NF-kappa B, which is present in nearly all cells. It's involved in larger scale kind of inflammatory responses, also cellular growth. So modulating that is key, but it's still, I don't jump to anti-inflammatory vitamin K.
So you're saying that vitamin D and vitamin K, directly in relation to her question, for insulin resistance and reducing inflammation, they're not the primary culprits, especially insulin resistance. You're just going to be playing around the edges if you're taking supplements there.
Right.
It's exercise, weight management, and diet are the biggest factors on insulin resistance.
And things that are more targeted to insulin resistance itself, namely chromium, just for...
Got it. And you said the vitamin, what was the D plus essentials?
Yes, that has the combination.
And that does have the vitamin K in there as well?
Yes.
So we do have one. She just didn't realize it. Cool.
Correct.
All right.
There's a theory for, but if you were to supplement with vitamin D, high amounts of vitamin D, and you were unknowingly deficient in vitamin K, that there's a potential for there's potential for issues there. And the whole theory is that, okay, you're getting too much vitamin D. Getting too much vitamin D can cause the enhanced absorption of calcium. Too much calcium, hypercalcemia. There's inherent issues with that at the level of the serum. And then if you're getting too little K, then there's the increased risk of calcification of the blood vessels. So the thought is, if there's not some harmonious balance between those two, so high in one, low in the other, could that be driving some of the, specifically the issues at the level of the blood vessel?
Because the vitamin K helps direct the calcium to bones.
Yeah.
And if you're getting way too much and you don't have the K to direct it, it could be going to the wrong places.
Yes.
That's the theory.
Yes. And also a lot of people...
It is pretty complicated. There's no doubt.
That's the simplest way to put it. Yeah. And especially you have to look at, who you're talking to or what their situation is. Magnesium deficiency is very common.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not eating quality, fruits and vegetables. So maybe you're taking a calcium supplement, just calcium alone. It's not a multi-mineral supplement like ours are. So now you're really out of balance with your calcium.
Okay.
And the calcium is looking for somewhere to go. And especially if you're lacking K, the potential is, you'll pass some of it, but you also may deposit it in your arteries, valves, etc. And that's going to contribute to cardiovascular disease.
Okay.
So again, the direct question with the insulin resistance and inflammation is a little iffier, not saying there's not a link there. There are things I looked up. It's just not first and foremost what comes to mind with those two. I'm sticking to the things we know more concretely.
Fair enough. And it's good that people are pointing these things out because, this is how we keep on the cutting edge and make sure that our products are doing those things. Yeah. But we do have one available.
Yes.
And it's a new product for just that
Relatively,
reason.
Yeah.
That's cool. Very, very cool. Well, since we're talking about vitamin D, I know you guys also had some interesting research about dementia risk and vitamin D. A little bit controversial. What do we got? What is going on?
Yeah. So you shared with us an interesting article titled "Sunshine: A Natural Dementia Drug." Adults with high vitamin D levels are up to a third less likely to suffer memory-robbing condition, study finds. And so the researchers analyzed brain tissue from nearly 300 people in Chicago. All had died within the last 6 years and agreed to take part of the study. Participants with more vitamin D in their brains were less likely, according to the article, to have dementia. And so that's pretty powerful stuff, I would say. And there are many sort of ways that we can look at this. And the actual study that they looked at, brain vitamin D forms cognitive decline and neuropathology in community-dwelling older adults. They want to explore more why those with higher vitamin D concentrations in the brain maybe showed less cognitive decline with time.
Right.
And so, Joey, I don't know if you want to step in a little bit.
So there's a correlation here between fewer people. If you had high vitamin D levels in your brain, you were less likely to have evidence of dementia and Alzheimer's and other dementia-related diseases in your brain tissue. That's the correlation. And so the question is this causal or what's going on? Am I guessing correctly based on that?
That's sort of like where they ended everything. They say, hey, this is what we observed. There's something here. But there is a potential for some reverse causation, but it's worth continuing to
research,
to sort of dig. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And maybe I'll start with a critique and then we can start to build into the positives.
Sure.
I mean, they're leading into this. I just kind of off record, off topic. I saw that there was even a vitamin D study in individuals who had already had progressed in their course of Alzheimer's disease. They were taking vitamin D, and they saw that the supplementation actually correlated with almost worsened, almost like an
aggravated condition.
Yes, in a sense. So all of that's to say, there's a flip side to there's always a flip side to everything, but we're doing our best to look at the totality of the evidence, and just because we're looking at one study does not imply that we're ignoring what else.
So this is not conclusive. Yeah. This is very much still open-ended research.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And I think what was really interesting too is that they did see differences in dementia, which would basically mean how they were functioning, testing their function. But they did not see any difference in amyloid plaque development. So those who had further along, full-blown, we'll call it Alzheimer's diagnosis, or Lewy body dementia, things that are measurable beyond, cognitive testing, that are actually, that you can test an MRI and see. They didn't find any difference in those people with the vitamin D.
That's fascinating.
So there's somewhere along the line, though, potentially that, despite having the physical manifestation of the Alzheimer's, that you are not as likely to have the outward manifestation of it and the symptomology of it because your vitamin D level was high. That is not a mechanism that I can explain, or that I think that they explained in the article.
Right.
But I did find that really interesting, that both in the good and the bad. Well, that would lead me to believe is why. Sometimes whenever I see data, I want to know why. I think that just helps me to process it, remember it, parlay it in other things potentially. But I found that really interesting.
I know there was a big hubbub a little while ago about some Vanderbilt University scientists casting a lot of doubt on past amyloid plaque research with relation to Alzheimer's. Is it possible that they are not directly related, or that they're not directly correlated, and that could explain why you can have buildup without the manifestation?
It's possible. It seems like it's a pretty hardcore diagnosis, though. And I know sometimes they don't test you or give you MRI because if the symptoms are so obvious and clear,
right,
sometimes they don't really bother even giving you the MRI.
Sure.
And it can be, tested and seen in an autopsy very easily.
Yeah.
But I would say that the link is pretty strong. That I would have to read that because that would be interesting. But as far as I know, that link is pretty strong.
Okay.
And there's just always, with all of these conditions, there is, with heart disease, there's uncharted territory.
Yes.
And so there's certainly similar territory with Alzheimer's. And so this is what this study reveals, is that there's always maybe some different underlying pathologies occurring independently and, in connection with one another. And so who's to say that there's not another component to what's driving the progression of dementia outside of vitamin D or outside of the plaques. It is just more or less a keeps things open-ended.
And in fact, there probably is something else driving it that we just don't know about yet, or some combination of things. And this is just one more little piece of information.
Yeah, because I found another study that shows that it did have effect on the amyloid plaques.
Wow.
That the vitamin D levels did. So again, anytime I mean, medicine in general, you're going to see a lot of conflicting things at times, but especially when you're talking about supplementation and body levels of things, how accurate is 25 OHD reflecting, like Dante said before, in your tissues and in your cells, how accurate is that, level in your blood whenever you're talking. What's really important is what it's doing in your cells. What is your level in the cells? So there's different ways to look at it, but I did try to look at other studies. I did see this one, 21,784, again, observational study, but they only saw an effect whenever there was true deficiency. So they only saw, we'll say, better way to say it, they only saw a link with dementia below 20. So in what would be, there's different definitions of what's insufficient. Some medical bodies say there's an insufficiency at 10 to 19 and the only true deficiency is below 10. Others say below 20 and others say below 30. Right. So this one cut off at 20 and said below 20, they saw correlation. Above 20, they did not. So that's getting into true deficiency with dementia. So there's a lot of studies out there that do end up giving little bits of different information, but I think the link is pretty. Now, again, can we say that taking vitamin D whenever you're 35 and having a level at 40 and 50 for your whole life, does that prevent dementia? That's what I would want to know. Right. But that's, that's going to require long-term, because if you're going to develop dementia, let's just say, God forbid, at 65, and you start taking vitamin D at 64, I just can't imagine that that's going to stop it. So you may say, hey, they may do this study. I was taking vitamin D and I got dementia. It did nothing for me. Well, yeah, you've been taking it for a year, and that's a disease process that's been ongoing in your body for God knows how long. Right. So that's why I'm going to go back to 35, 40. That I would think this would, if there's a true causal relationship, not just a link, I think we can see that there is a correlation. We're still not sure of the causation. Right. The causation would have to be studied at an earlier age. In particular, there's a lot of people now that do substitute with that supplement with vitamin D for immune system issues, for potential autoimmune conditions, because their level's low, for bone issues. So people are out there doing it. It's just a matter of funding the study to see what's going on over long term. Of course. All right. Well, so you're saying this is not bulletproof research. Run out and buy some vitamin D if you don't want to have Alzheimer's. It's not bulletproof, the cure all. But I guess the way I look at it, if you're listening to our show, et cetera, probably have a little bit of a bent towards supplements. I do. So when you see so much smoke around vitamin D in a positive way, bones, immune, inflammation, dementia, it's just another reason for me to continue to take it. So again, does that mean, the same? Am I saying again that once you do that, you're going to prevent dementia? No, right. I'm just saying that there's a lot of information out there, and is it irrefutable, bulletproof? No, but there's again so much in so many different ways that vitamin D to me is a no-brainer, and it's not super easy to get from food either. This is not like maybe B vitamins or minerals from meats and from vegetables. This is a little tougher. You've got to eat oily fish, tuna, salmon, egg yolks, organ meat, mushrooms. Those are the main sources. So again, how many people are sedentary and indoors? Basic. Yeah. I mean, even myself, when I look at it a lot often, it's home to car to work to home, and I'm not getting any sunlight. And if I really look at the amount of time, so you're figuring that we're inside the vast majority of the time. You're only really intaking vitamin D when you have oily fish, eggs, maybe some mushrooms or organ meat. I mean, you're talking about, a real predisposition to have a deficiency in it, And when you look at it that way, now the thing about vitamin D is you can get a level checked and know where you are. That's good. So that's good. Dante, in an ideal world, if I want to increase my vitamin D levels before I take supplements, what should I be doing?
Yeah, Joey alluded to the difficulty in attaining an adequate amount from your diet.
I would just like to say for the record, I ate mushrooms and organ meat in the last week.
I love both. I do.
They're fantastic.
Yeah. So continue, striving to get those foods in your diet. They're beneficial for a multitude of reasons. Yeah. So in addition to that, obviously sunlight is the main source of vitamin D.
So I'm a plant?
So you're basically a plant. Yes.
With feelings?
So there's it is a bit complicated, but UV light, near infrared light, and what happens at the level of the skin, it gets converted into, by the liver and the kidneys and such into the active form, And so they say that maybe 10 to 30 minutes a day of direct sunlight isn't the worst idea.
Yeah.
Obviously, depending on where you live, certain parts of the globe, it's easier to get that than others.
Sure.
Certain people have fairer skin, and yes, you want to get vitamin D from the sun, but you also don't want to sunburn either. That's not ideal, but just enough, get some sunlight, generally adequate, but without having a feel for maybe some of your other risk factors or underlying conditions or vitamin D levels. You're not going to know necessarily how much you need, or if you need to pursue treatment. But similar to trying to attain vitamin D from your food, there's a whole host of other benefits, with getting sunlight.
I was gonna say you can go for a walk, you can exercise and kill two birds with one stone. That's kind of a cool idea. All right, fair enough. Next up, we've got I have seen so many articles recently talking about the risks of ultra processed foods. I mean, it's constant. There's one from Time, there's one from Today, there's articles from JAMA, there's all kinds of things. I mean, literally, it's at least once a week I see something talking about beware. What in the world is ultra processed food, and why is it so horrible?
Yeah, so there's something out there. It's called the NOVA food classification.
Okay.
And it has 4 levels of food processing. So it might just be helpful to kind of start there. And then Joey, if you want to cut me off or add stuff,
sure.
It's, or whatever.
Yeah.
So the first classification, unprocessed or minimally processed foods. These foods did not undergo processing or underwent minimal processing techniques. This includes fractioning, grinding, pasteurization. And so, believe it or not, meats, fruit, bananas, oranges, pineapples, tomatoes, you name it, legumes fall into the first classification.
Okay, so something you could get at the store without any kind of packaging on it.
Pretty much, yes. The second group encompassed by processed culinary ingredients. And so these ingredients are obtained from minimally processed foods and are used to season, cook, and create culinary dishes. So salt, sugar, vegetable oils, butter, and other fats.
Okay.
Third classification, as you can see, it gets a little more intense as far as its processing procedures.
Okay, so those are the unprocessed and minimally processed. Mm-hmm. So I guess processed would be next.
Processed, yeah. So if we look at what that includes, we're looking at bottled vegetables, meat.
Bottled veg? Oh, hang on. Bottled vegetables? Are we talking about maybe canning? I was going to say pickles or.
I mean, you can still get bottled vegetables like a pickle.
Yeah, that's what we just. okay.
That's true. Yeah.
Making sure I'm processing what it is we're talking about here.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
So you take unprocessed foods and add sort of
a process,
add a process to them.
Okay.
Yes,
makes sense.
So breads, cheeses, purees, pastes, those sorts of things that have undergone more industrialized processes.
Got it.
The ultra processed foods are the cookies, ice cream, like the ready to eat meals, soft drinks, sugary drinks,
Got it.
fast food hamburgers, chicken nuggets. Those that have they're kind of just one step further along than the processed
You
foods.
took the processed things and then processed it some more.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look anything like it did when it was in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay, so that's what ultra processed food is. Why is it so horrible? I mean, if it's done in a clean facility and you're starting with safe ingredients, why is it not as good on the back end?
You could probably deduce from especially the last category there that it tend to be low in fiber, high in sugar, and high in calories. So that's we'll call that from a weight standpoint, that those are heavy hitters. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you've got to throw in that they're typically preservative laden, dye laden, emulsifiers. Those affect your gut and your healthy bacteria in your gut, your digestive system. There's a lot of There's a lot of insidious things that are in there. That doesn't mean that this given preservative consumed is going to lead to this for sure. It puts a lot of smoke, so to say. Like I said about the other thing, a lot of smoke is there when you're dealing with those foods, even beyond the obvious that I'm sure we'd all point out that, again, low in fiber, high in sugar, high in calories.
Okay, so you're saying, like, if my wife makes a loaf of bread versus if we buy it at the store, one of the big things is things like preservatives are added. You
don't
at
even
the
have
store.
access to what could possibly go in an ultra processed type of bread.
So are these the ingredients that I can't pronounce on the packaging?
Yes. And again, I'm not saying that any one of them, but even just look at a sausage, something like that. You say, oh, all we did was add, but then there's nitrates in there. There's a little sodium nitrate. That's maybe the only actual, non-natural preservative beyond salt, but that can make the difference.
Got it.
So that's I just think that a lot of it does become obvious, and then there's more, I don't want to say psychological, but more insidious things that a lot of these ultra processed foods, even if, let's just say from a macro standpoint, they are designed to be healthy, like a quick TV dinner type meal.
Sure.
They tend to still be heavily laden with whether it's salt or sugar, that they end up basically kind of training your brain to like that kind of food. You know what I mean? Versus more natural food. And you start to get into those habits.
Habit forming.
Yes. Yeah. The quickness of it, the ease in our busy society, the taste itself can definitely end up affecting what you crave and what you end up eating even more than you realize it as time goes on.
Okay. So it's the habit forming element of it is also a problem in addition to the general contents. Okay.
Yeah.
So
they're hyper flavors. You can't mimic ice cream in nature, let alone
that's a really good point.
A lot of sugar in something that can be pretty obvious, but even a lot of salt, even just to preserve the food. So yeah, I think the more you can go to a Whole Foods style place, and if you're getting those kind of things, I mean, hey, I do some of those quick ready meal too, but I try to make sure that when you go to a place like Whole Foods, you can trust that a lot of the preservatives and things like that are gone. Okay. At least you're minimizing the issues with them, because from a macro standpoint, they're okay. And then you're limiting some of the other things that doing that isn't the end of the world. But when you go to the old school average TV dinner type food, let alone, the heavier processed junk foods, that's where you get into a real problem.
Okay. All right. So what should we be eating instead? You just started to say it. So we're talking about whole foods. I mean, just theoretically as close to nature as possible. Is that the goal here?
That's definitely the goal. It's, because of the environment, it's obviously way easier said than done.
Yeah.
And they're still, like Joey said, for convenience sake, these food processes have had benefits as well.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
You know what I mean? But again, things just flip too far to one side. And it's hard, and it's ultimately not super productive just to say, hey, go buy more unprocessed foods, because then what's that saying? Then it's people need to learn a whole new set of skills potentially. They need to get better at cooking. Well, how much of these foods closer to nature and vegetables and such do I need to buy?
Right.
When I bought them in this package, it had exactly what I needed.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure it's clear that it is still, even though we know what to do, it is still more difficult because we're inundated with it. Mm-hmm. So, but yes, ideally you start to make these changes slowly, and, you start to, maybe you did start with the frozen vegetables or the frozen meals, and you added some of your own spinach or bell peppers or whatever. And then slowly you just buy the frozen vegetables, but you cooked your own set of chicken, or you heated up your own tofu or whatever it is. There's ways to sort of
stagger
play
step.
both. Yes, to play both sides, because occasionally it's fine to have these foods. Again, we're never going to be able to avoid them.
Right.
And so unless we massively change the food environment, we're always going to be surrounded by them. So we might as well not fight it. Just try and, limit it. And so for some people, it's one or two times a week that they're able to, to try to limit that.
Yep.
For some people, maybe it's just a smaller amount once a day. They give themselves permission for, whatever that processed item is, whether it's a boxed meal or ice cream or whatever.
Okay. So what I think I hear you saying is, if you're eating a hyper processed meal right now, like the TV dinner, maybe try making it with frozen vegetables and fresh chicken.
Yeah, get
first.
creative.
Mm-hmm. You know, you can have the exact same meal, but just slightly processed. And then if you can get comfortable with that, then maybe try to cut up some fresh vegetables and throw those in there instead of the frozen. And it's okay to work your way out of this. Mm-hmm. But freaking out and deciding you're never eating this again, I mean, that would be lovely, but sustainability over time is always the king.
Yeah. And then as you start, you know, sharpening that cooking tool set, you just start freezing your own meals. So, you know, so you have a little extra. It's not going to taste. I mean, I don't think that frozen meal, like my own cooked frozen meals, taste as good as if you cook them fresh.
Sure.
But having a handful of those at your disposal, if you're going to be cooking anyway, is just another example of a slow way to implement that.
Makes sense. Okay. All right. Very cool. Very cool. We got an email in from Linda. Hi there. Thank you for continuing Dr. Joe's legacy of helping people out with his medical and godly wisdom. I have questions concerning MS, diagnosed in 2008. I'm 65 years old, limited mobility. I would like info on the best supplements, diets, exercises, etc. Wow, that's a lot. Sincerely, Linda. Thank you, Linda. So she wants to make some changes. What are we going to do? What are some suggestions?
Sure. So I'll just start with a brief overview of MS. So MS encompasses the autoimmune disease of the central nervous system. It's characterized by chronic inflammation, demyelination, gliosis, and neural loss.
Those are all big words.
Yes. And so it's the damage to this myelin, or it's basically the insulation of the neurons within your brain that are damaged. And then this disrupts those normal signals that are going to and from, you know, the brain and to different parts of the body.
Okay. So the insulation. So like on a wire, literally a copper wire has a plastic, it's plastic sheath around it. The myelin is that plastic sheath keeping the signal where it needs to be.
Yep.
And MS is damaging that. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So over time, it's where you can get weakness because you're just not conducting those signals from your brain to the areas of the body. Some people lose their ability to move and to function over time. Also, though, because you think about your nerves, it also conducts the opposite way, conducts pain from peripheral to central. So it goes both ways. So that's inside your own body. It's an autoimmune. Your body's attacking. Any contact, with that nerve can then cause pain. So there can be a lot of, nerve type pains like shocking sensations, et cetera, that can occur. But it really comes down to even just movements of the neck. Really comes down to, the loss of that myelin sheath.
Okay. Wow.
So and it just seems, like a lot of autoimmune diseases, there, are links to genetics for sure, but also different exposures to different viruses or bacteria, along with that, your sex, 2 to 3 times more likely if you're female, age 20 to 40 years old at onset. Also, and my mind kind of jumps to, does this, link it to vitamin D potentially, but temperate areas and higher latitudes. They've definitely, this is from the Mayo Clinic, they definitely found that northern US, Canada, Australia, those farther away from the equator, north and south, are more likely to have higher MS rates too.
Interesting.
So, I mean, again, is that 100%, vitamin D's, that's I'm going to prevent that. But it does, again, show you the links, especially this has been kind of a vitamin D themed show.
Yeah.
That it does, again, put this more kind of fuel to that fire about what, vitamin D's potential link with especially with autoimmune conditions and its ability to modulate. So
got it.
It's a very debilitating disease for sure.
Wow.
Also a link to obesity. And I think this is where, so many of these diseases, yes, there's a genetic component and that's the overriding one, but its expression, its severity, when it comes on, if it comes on, but childhood and adolescent obesity have been linked.
Really?
And what we know about adipose tissue, fat tissue, it's not inert. It's not just sitting there. It releases inflammatory leukotrienes and tumor necrosis factor alpha, which is a very powerful inflammatory that's actually blocked in medications that are used for MS and are used for autoimmune conditions. Biologic drugs block tumor necrosis factor alpha, and we know that fat can release some of that. So over time, if again the likelihood. There's a link between obesity that your own body is producing a lot of inflammation beyond potentially, what goes awry, centrally, in the process. So again, genetics, then linked to climate, sex, and potential, obesity as well. And yeah, that's, I think, pretty incredible to kind of put all that together.
Wow. Okay. So she has limited mobility.
Yeah.
But wants to try to diet, exercise, and supplement. That's a lot to bite off. What can we do to help her there?
Supplement wise, again, given at the stage that she's in, I don't want to, again, keep tooting the horn of vitamin D, but I think that's a no brainer.
Yeah.
And just allow her immune system to hopefully function in the best modulatory capacity that it can,
sure.
To prevent further damage potentially. Again, inexpensive supplement, no downside, unless you start getting mega levels, which we're not going to recommend. Get a level done, take an amount that's commensurate to that level and do that, I think, first and foremost.
Okay.
There are definitely links to neuron health and B12. But that becomes a little tough because it's mainly linked to if you have a deficiency of B12, that in and of itself, has caused the demyelination, that's similar, but it's just done in a different pathway.
Okay.
So we know that vitamin B12 is involved from that standpoint in myelin sheath health, but it's in a different mechanism than what the damage that's being done by the multiple sclerosis disease process is doing. So it's a little bit different.
Counteractive.
However, then what I did find that was interesting to kind of loop me back to it is that homocysteine is basically an inflammatory marker in the body. Okay. It's shown linked to cardiovascular disease, different, inflammation pathways. It's elevated in relapsing remitting MS. A lot of times what that means is in MS, what you see in a lot of cases is relapsing basically means you go into a period where there's a lot of pain, a lot of lack of ambulation, et cetera. You've got all the symptoms are really hitting you hard.
Yeah.
And then you've got a remission period where you feel a little better. That can happen naturally. That happens with meds, steroids, other biologic drugs that are used. But they found, and is it chicken or the egg? Is it because you've got so much going on in your body? That's why you're an inflammatory marker like homocysteine goes up. Maybe. So B12 and folate, we know for sure lower homocysteine. Okay. So I think from that angle, B12 and folate could be a good thing to do, and vitamin D. But again, life changing things with it. I wish I had more, but I think those are two basic supplements that have other benefits, especially, bone health. If she is not ambulatory, having trouble getting around, her bones are going to start to, it's a feedback mechanism.
Yeah.
Your bones are potentially going to start to weaken a little bit. Vitamin D can help with that too. So I think there's multiple different angles there.
Okay. What can we do in terms of movement? If she's not moving a lot right now, how can we help her there?
Depending on what exactly her level of activity is, you ideally kind of we would just meet her exactly where she's at. I don't know if she's already working with a, physical therapist or occupational therapist, but finding the right entry point is most important. And then progressing, progressing where appropriate. So no matter if you are, if you find yourself wheelchair bound, or you have a form that you still, can walk, run, perform different strength movements, there's definitely options. So the more ambulatory that you are, the more, the more comfortable that you are with those sorts of things. The same recommendations are there, trying to hit enough aerobic exercise, whether that's walking or, you have a stationary bike, flexibility exercises of the upper and lower extremities. Her provider may have already given her a, spirometer or something to breathe into that keeps the capacity of the lungs, up to snuff. There's arm cycling. There's most of these, devices and such are found in, physical therapy offices and all of that.
Sure.
But trying to actively participate in all of those as frequent as possible, are ultimately only going to help. And in the same way that you would progress a power lifter over time, your progression might look different, living with MS, but the goal is to progress in whatever capacity that you're, capable of.
So you're saying start where you're at and don't stop doing that, and then try to do more, whatever that looks like. It makes sense to me. Okay. All right. Anything diet-wise that she needs to be cognizant of? Avoid ultra-processed foods.
Yeah, and I think, at core level, Dante probably has more specifics, but inflammatory foods, processed foods, heavy amounts of red meat, in excess. I think when, you're looking at high sugar foods, those types of things, pretty obvious bad foods. The reason, again, not just for your weight, etc. It's really about the inflammatory. The last thing you need, you've got your body having, overactive immunity. Now you're going to kind of fuel that. I think it's just something that is obvious to me to avoid. And I think also just general eating healthy is only going to help because you're fighting an uphill battle. Obviously, if you're having trouble getting around, you're in pain. I think anything that you're doing to help make sure that at least from a nutrient status, macro and micro, I think is key.
Okay, that makes sense. So you've got a fire and you want to stop feeding it fuel. Avoid the inflammatory foods. That makes sense.
There is an inflammatory food index.
Yeah.
The clinical utility of that, I'm not comfortable enough to say to tell her how to use that per se.
Oh, okay.
But I know that it's out there, and it might, if she was curious,
it's basically a resource to look into.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Well, I think that's it for us for today. All of our products are available on our website, askjoedimatteo.com. That site is also where you can sign up for our mailing list, which is the best way to know when things go on sale. You can find past episodes of this show, as well as classic episodes of the show that started all of this, Ask Joe DiMatteo. If you have questions, we'd like to hear them. Questions at askjoedimatteo.com. That is askjoedimatteo.com. And the show notes and anything we referenced will also be available on there as well. If you're only listening, you are missing half the fun. Every episode is available as video too. Just go to YouTube or Rumble and look for Generation Health. Big thanks to Josiah Schweinberg, keeping us looking good. Michael Deppish, our editor. Joyce Gibb, our nurse practitioner who does private consultations. Diane Silverman manages our products. Terry does scheduling. Cecilia does distribution. Joey DiMatteo, Dante DiMatteo. I'm Tyler Andrews. And that is it for us this week. So it's your turn. What are you going to do with what you've learned? Are you just listening? Or are you going to take action and become part of this Generation Health?